This is a CBC podcast.
A newspaper columnist in Quebec writes that smart business people look for opportunities in bankruptcies. He's urging Sophie Brocher, the CEO of Hydro-Quebec, to look east and start negotiating with Newfoundland and Labrador for our most valuable assets. The writer, Francis Vai, asks the people in this province to put aside our emotions and be rational. He says it makes financial sense for us to sell Churchill and Muskrat Falls to Quebec. CBC reporter Terry Roberts called up Montreal-based Francis Vai.
Hydro-Quebec actually needs a lot of power for the contract they have with the United States. Actually, they are negotiating 2 or 3 contracts. There's one that was signed recently with the Maine, and there's another one with New York. And so it's for like 20 years or so. So they need much more energy to, and as well, there's also all the electrification of transport in Quebec. So they need a lot of power. So we cannot allow to lose the energy from Newfoundland even if it's in 20 years that the contract is finished. So we need this energy. So that's the context.
Yeah. So what scenario do you envision here that might envision all sides here?
The scenario is this one. Actually, there's Muskrat Fall that costs much more than that was targeted. So and that's the one thing. So actually, Muskrat Fall could lead to 24 cents per kilowatt hour. That would double the price Newfoundlanders pays for linear energy. It's not possible for Newfoundlanders to have those prices. It would be too hard. And on the other end, there's a contract for Upper Churchill that you sell at 1/4 cents per kilowatt hour to Hydro-Québec. So the assumption is to merge those 2 contracts, those 2 power supply, to merge that, and then Hydro-Québec would buy a stake of the boat project, and the price would go up, and would allows Newfoundlanders to get about 300 million to 500 million more. That's my calculation from this deal. It's about half the deficit, actually.
$300 to $500 million in revenue annually from the Churchill River, with if Hydro-Quebec were to take over Upper Churchill and Muskrat Falls.
But it could be like 50%. It's all on the table. You can negotiate to have only to negotiate a partnership, like 50% of all that. So it would be not 300 million, but 150 million. I think it's up to you to negotiate.
But why would Hydro-Quebec want an asset that's so debt-ridden with such a expensive electricity?
In 20 years, the contract Upper Churchill is finished. So in 20 years, the price of the power we have there would go from 1/4 cents to maybe 5 or 6 cents a kilowatt hour. And we have to know that the power of Upper Churchill is 5,000. It's about 5,000 megawatt. And the one in Muskrat Falls at 800 kilowatt hours. So it's much bigger. Upper Churchill, 5,000 megawatt of power is 13% of all the supply, all the power that Quebec have every year. So 13% of the power of Hydro-Quebec. So the assumption is that there's no way Hydro-Quebec wants to renegotiate before 2041, and there's no way that the price would go up. So in merging both of them before that, I'm quite sure that Hydro-Quebec would hear what Newfoundlanders has to propose in that context.
Your tone is like Newfoundland is bankrupt essentially, and now's a chance for Hydro-Quebec to swoop in and to maintain its strong position. Is that the Canadian way of doing things here?
You can see the story like that. We can say we'll help Newfoundlanders and be charitable for Newfoundlanders. But in business, that's not the way it functions. That's not the way things are going. We can't stay like that until 2041 and do anything. But I think in the context, actually, Newfoundlanders has to be rational. Moya Greene in the report say professional. It's difficult to admit, but Newfoundland is like in bankruptcy. So it does not happen very often in the Canadian history that a province goes like in bankrupt. And you have a big asset. The oil industry goes down with the climate problem. The great asset you have is Churchill River, and it's up to you to negotiate. And Hydro-Québec in their part needs a lot of energy actually, and to secure this energy. So
there's a lot of debt involved here. So why would Hydro-Québec want to take over all that debt?
I think federal government should erase a part of the debt of Muskrat Falls. It could be, I think it's $5 or $8 billion or something. In that big negotiation, would have to erase a part of the debt. It would allow Newfoundland to pay less interest payments and then to resolve the problem, a part of the financial problem.
And what about Gull Island? There's still a major undeveloped asset on the river called Gull Island, which you're aware of. Of course, you wrote about this one. Could that be tucked into this deal as well?
Yeah, I think it could be in the deal as well. But frankly, for Gull Island and for other major hydroelectric project, I'm not sure that it would be developed nextly. Why I say that? Because the wind energy, the price of wind energy goes down very quickly, and the sun energy as well. So, for example, actually, the latest big project in Quebec is 6 cents. It goes to 6 cents the kilowatt hour for the hydroelectric, and wind energy is actually at 6 cents. So, and it goes down. So, in 20 years, in 2041, for example. Probably the price of wind energy would be like 4 cents or 5 cents or less than that. So the Gull Island not sure that Gull Island would be profitable in that context.
You know, there's a long history here of controversy with the Upper Churchill contract signed in 1969. Plenty, as you know, plenty of legal challenges have been made. They've all ended on the side of Hydro-Québec. We built Muskrat Falls the way we did in order to avoid dealing with Quebec. So that's going to be a hard pill for a lot of people in this province to swallow.
I understand that. Absolutely. I understand that. But politically, it would be very difficult to accept for Newfoundlanders. I understand that. But I'm a business columnist, so I think that's the best rational way to solve the problem of Newfoundlanders. I understand that Hydro-Québec owns about 35% of Upper Churchill, the Churchill Fall, and Newfoundlanders 65%. It's not necessarily to buy all the asset, but to deal a chunk of the asset.
So do you believe Newfoundland and Labrador has any bargaining power here at all? You were at a big disadvantage, do you believe?
So in the past, you didn't want to negotiate. You want to build Muskrat Falls. And actually, that's the situation. So unfortunately for Newfoundlanders, Hydro-Québec has 2 or 3 main contracts that's going on with the United States. That was not the case 5 years from now in the past. So actually, Hydro-Québec needs energy, and Newfoundland needs a deal. So I think there's mutual needs for both.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
And that was CBC's Terry Roberts speaking with La Presse business columnist Francis Vai. Vai recently wrote a column in La Presse where he's been covering business and the economy for almost a decade. In it, he urged the CEO of Hydro-Québec to pounce on Newfoundland and Labrador and take advantage of our near bankruptcy to buy Churchill and Muskrat Falls. There's a full article with response from Andrew Parsons on cbc.ca/NL. Well, I'd love to know what Labrador listeners think think of that idea. You can call our trap line with your thoughts on it. The number 1-888-699-8255.
Hi, my name is Boss Bennett from Nain, Labrador. You are listening to Labrador Morning on CBC Radio 1, 95.1 in Nain. Thank you.
Well, earlier this week, Andrew Panashaway of Shahashi and Brian Andre of Satil released their new CD, Anujish. It was in front of a sold-out crowd at the Lawrence O'Brien Arts Centre in Happy Valley, Goose Bay. Labrador Morning's Reagan Burden went by their sound check to talk to Andrew and Brian about their release and why recording music in Inuimun is important to them.
Tell me about the music that is on this CD. What inspires the music you write?
It's first about the language. We were trying to our language to be live as of now, and that's why we think it's important for the Innu musicians.
What kind of feedback have you gotten from the music so far?
People want they want CD. They want right now. The selling is starting now in reserves here in community and in Quebec reserves.
How did it feel for the show to have sold out?
We feel happy. We're happy. Yeah.
How long have you been writing music?
Oh, about almost 30 years now. I did about 7 or 6 CDs now, I think. 7, plus this 8, I think.
Is this CD any different from your previous CDs?
Yeah, this one is different. My group is called Michikamal. And right now, Brian and I, my friend, his name is Brian Audrey. And we decided to do a different way, like a friendship, to do CD together.
What is the style of the music?
Country, Innu, folklore combination.
What kind of stories are you telling in the songs?
Most of the singing is about friendship. Most of the songs is about the culture. It's about the animals, environment. It's all about the way how we feel about our families and our relatives within our circle. They sing a lot of there's a lot of emotion involved in the singing at it, and it's more like a storytelling.
I didn't know.
One of the CDs that he's referring to, there's his father speaking and telling a story in one of his singing, and it's really personal stories that are passed down from Innu, and he's actually singing in one of the CDs, in one of the songs that they'll be performing tonight.
Why is it so important for you to tell these stories through music?
My late dad taught me how to everything, like culture. That's where I get the words the way he talked, and that's where I wrote a song for.
Would you be able to tell me one of the...
some of my my children and my grandchildren, I told them to start trying to learn music. Some of them, they are now. I told them to continue, learn.
You try to that? It took shish me, my voice. Shish.
Yeah, he wants more vocal.
English, yes. 1, 2, I. Thank you. Yes.
Brian, how are you feeling about the release?
He basically said, I'm excited about the performance tonight. I got up today thinking it's my birthday. That's how excited I am. I feel like it's like a Christmas show. Like Santa's going to come in and that kind of feeling of a Christmas spirit. So he feels excited about it. He said because of the pandemic and everything else delayed, they haven't performed anywhere, and because of that, standing here is unreal for him. And it's he just can't wait to perform tonight, and so he's a little overexcited to do this show tonight.
Is this the first CD that you two have made together?
Yeah, he said we've known each other for many years. Where this is our first time actually singing together as a group, and so he's pretty excited about that, and he feels that this is almost like a dream.
When you think about the stories in the music, do you have a favorite story that's in one of the songs?
He said, I love Andrew's song because it's a love song. And the love song that he talks about the whole, like everybody. It's everybody. It's not just about the love songs of the Innu, but it talks about the story of the love song for everybody, that what they go through and how they cherish and how they love each other and how they love one another. So basically that's what I enjoy listening to Andrew's stories about, the love stories of his song.
Do both of you write the songs, or do you sing them together? What's the dynamic of the group?
Yeah, Andrew brought different types of music. Brian also brought a different kind of flavor of music. And we both kind of came together. And this is between Andrew and Brian's music. He said, my wish is that because I can't speak to you and talk to you in the language that we can communicate, but I would wish that one of you, in our interviews, that you can promote the Innu language so people can listen to it, so people can hear it, and not just within the region, but also with everywhere else in Quebec, so that they can hear the Innu Eimun, and that we also want to cherish and protect that language.
Hi, I'm Danny Ricketts from Churchill Falls Library. You're listening to Labrador Morning on CBC Radio 1, 91.1 FM in Churchill Falls.
Labrador should become its own territory. It's a comment that many people in the region have heard time and time again. When that suggestion was brought up in a local Facebook page following the Green Report, MP Yvonne Jones shared that it's been a few years since she looked into it, but that, quote, it's worth a legal review. The MP would not do an interview on the subject. Labrador Morning's Reagan Burden did reach out to Peter Russell, a professor emeritus at the University of Toronto and expert in constitutional law. He talked about the steps that would need to be taken in order for Labrador to become its own territory.
Well, they're set out in the amending formula. Section 43, it would require an amendment to make Labrador a territory, a vote in the Parliament of Canada, the Senate and the House of Commons would have to by majority approve of such a change, and most importantly, it would require a majority in the Legislative Assembly of Newfoundland Labrador approve such a change. With those two votes, it could be done.
In theory, it could be done, but
In theory, and according to law, there is a path, but it's a path that's pretty much blocked politically, particularly at the Legislative Assembly of Newfoundland Labrador level. It's for me, and I think almost anyone who thinks about it, almost impossible to conceive of circumstances in which a majority in that Legislative Assembly over in St. John's would say, yes, we can part with Labrador. At any time, that would have been difficult. Once Labrador was made part of Newfoundland. But right now, with the economy so stretched out in Newfoundland, Labrador, and Newfoundland facing a state of indebtedness that is the worst of any jurisdiction in all of North America, not just Canada. It really, the mind boggles why a majority would be in favor of cutting Labrador out of the province.
So the decision really is not up to people in Labrador.
That's right, yeah. The Labradorians are a small minority in the provincial legislative assembly, and they have no special rights.
Do you think it would ever happen?
I've lived long enough to know that I can never say never. Imagine a situation where all of a sudden Labrador is extremely impoverished. Its resources aren't worth anything, and it's draining money out of Newfoundland. And then you could see a majority saying, let's get rid of this territory that's costing us so much. I suppose anything can happen in the world. You can't rule that out.
It's more likely that it wouldn't happen.
That's right. A million times more likely than it wouldn't happen. I can say so. It's really unlikely to happen.
You talked about Section 43 of the amending formula. So would you go into a bit more detail about what that states and how that works?
Sure. It's a section that applies to a constitutional change affecting one province, but not all the provinces. It could be as many as 9 or 2 or 3. So it's not going to be using the general formula because it doesn't affect the whole country. And it's a special provision for these amendments that partially change a bit of the country. In this case, just one province's border and changes that. It hardly changes the Newfoundland border with Quebec. I suppose it does because Newfoundland and Quebec would no longer share a border. And so that's what Section 43 was really designed to facilitate. And besides applying to the boundaries between provinces, it applies to bilingualism, the use of English and French. So it's got 2 applications, one to boundaries and one to language use. And those are given as examples. The 43 says this amendment applies again to one or more, but not all the provinces, including boundary changes and changes in language.
And this idea is really unprecedented. When Nunavut did become a territory, it split from another territory and not a province. So has anything like this idea ever happened? Well,
no. The possibility that has been anticipated most often is a province expanding and taking over a territory. And when you think of human nature, it's more likely that a province will be interested in grabbing a territory and adding it than subtracting it. And that's also provided for in the Constitution of Canada. There's another kind of change that is important, and that is some territories have dreamed of becoming provinces. And there's provision in the Constitution for adding provinces. It's a very difficult thing to do. It really influences the amending formula, the general amending formula. We haven't talked about Northern Labrador, which is a self-governing Inuit. One of the first questions would be, what does it want? Because under another part of our Constitution, relations with Indigenous people, you can't just take self-governing Indigenous territory like that and say, hey, you're now going to be part, you're no longer in Newfoundland, you're not in any province, you're in the territory, a new territory of Labrador. So that has to be brought into account. On the benefit side, I think Labradorians would benefit from the becoming dependent for their payment of their social services and so on, being dependent on Ottawa, which is a much wealthier, richer source of funding, the federal government of Canada, than the government of Newfoundland. I think that would be the perceived benefit, but what up against maybe a very serious deficit.
And that was Peter Russell, Professor Emeritus at the University of Toronto, speaking with Labrador Morning's Reagan Burden. Well, a sewage blockage has caused extensive damage to the arena in Nain. The building is sitting with about 2 inches of raw sewage on the first floor after it came up from the toilets. Julius Dicker is the Onyakok in the community, and he says it's an unfortunate event, but they're working to get it cleaned up and repaired as soon as possible. He spoke with the CBC's Meg Roberts.
Over the past weekend, there was a sewer backup. And it came up through our arena, through the toilets there, and it caused extensive damage to the first floor. We found out what the problem was, and we got that cleared up. Right now, our insurance company is in the process of, after some due diligence on the sewer system itself on Sandbanks, where the plug was discovered, to make sure that that doesn't be a problem while they're cleaning up. So we are calling the insurance company today, and they're going to be hiring a contractor to clean up the arena for us. So our insurance covered that, so we are fortunate that way. So once the balls are rolling, I guess, and the contracts are let, our arena hopefully will be ready for public use again before the end of summer.
What does extreme damage mean?
Everything that's in that sewer line was running into our building. There was about inch and a half or 2 inches of raw sewage and water that was on the floor, right throughout the first floor, so it was like that now for the past 3 days, for sure, 4 days, and you know what that does to anything that's underneath it, right? So everything has to be pulled up, replaced, cleaned, and then put back so that the public health is not at risk.
Gosh, what a shame, eh? I mean, just...
Yeah, we just got her fixed up for the next 5 years or so. The life extended on that, but with the insurance, everything that we've done is going to be repaired and then ready for public use again by the end of summer. The sewer system itself, if it's working, it's working. Right now, there's no problem with the sewer system. It's just that... I don't know if it's freak of nature or what, we had a huge runoff and then we ran out of bathroom tissue and all that. People start putting rags and stuff down their toilets, a combination of sand leaking in. It just happened, you know what I mean? So we're hoping that's a one-time incident, but that also reminds the community and reminds us as a community government that, we have to be diligent in letting people know, don't put rags down your washroom, toilet. Don't put Pampers down there, whatever. Once out of sight and out of mind, that it might be easy for a family to think that it's gone, but it's not. It has to go through the system, and for sure, if they congest in one area and there's a small block, it's going to build up and it's going to block. And this is what happened. Couldn't believe what was going down that sewer line once we cleaned her.
And that is Nain Onyakok Julius Dicker talking about the sewer backup at the arena. Now, we also asked Dicker about construction plans in Nain over the summer, and he says the top priority is the water and sewer lines.
Well, this summer we're continuing on with the water line replacement up there on Sandbanks Road. They did not quite finish it off last fall because of the weather or the ground freezing up and stuff like that. So they're coming back now in the middle of June or second week in June and doing the commissioning, make sure that what they put down, there's no leaks in that. Then they're going to install those lines into the residences of that street. the other projects that we have going or ongoing or to be done, we're going to start on. We hope to start on Middle Path Road, which is street next to Sandbanks, and do the same thing. The other things we have ongoing, we need to complete a water sewer capacity study, which means that, we have to get engineers to come in and look at our system that we have now to see if it is capable of taking extra development in our community so that, our water and sewer capacity is able to take it. We don't know that yet. So right now, until that's done, there is not going to be any housing development in Nain, because we're just not sure if our sewer system can take what it is now. We just put on 30 new lots there last year and hooked it up to the system, and so that put a big extra load on the system itself.
And that was Julius Dicker, and he's the Onukok in Nain.
We were watching TV. Watching TV. We were watching TV. Watching TV.
By order of the Peaky Blinders. Well, most of you know exactly what I'm talking about, but for those of you who don't, listen up. Wayne Walsh, our movie and TV reviewer, finally gave in to watching the British period crime drama this week, and he's here with his thoughts. Good morning, Wayne.
Good morning, Janice. How are you?
I'm pretty good. So why has it taken you so long to jump on the Peaky Blinders bandwagon?
I can't even really give you an answer. I know we tried to watch it a long time ago, but we weren't really dedicated to actually putting in a little bit of effort to do it. And the first episode was a bit slow, and I remember saying, well, we'll turn it off. But too many reviews and too many people around saying it was a good show that I had to finally sit down and start trying to watch it.
So now that you did press play, are you hooked?
Oh, super hooked. What a binge-worthy TV show if there ever was one.
How much of it have you binge-watched?
I'm embarrassed to tell you, but it's been like 3 seasons in a week, so that's pretty high for myself, definitely. But besides the hockey playoffs, it's definitely something to be at. Definitely something to watch if you want something entertaining and something that'll keep you going and something to actually keep you interested, which is hard for most shows these days.
So for those TV watchers who, like you, Wayne, didn't get in on the Peaky Blinder hype, we have the trailer from the season's launch to set things up.
We're Peaky Blinders. We're not scared of coppers.
We will rid this city of his kind. Justice will be done.
If you want to be part of my organisation, you have to make sacrifices. I'm a businessman. I want to make my business successful. From now on, we do it my way.
And that just makes me want to watch the thing all over again. So what is the series all about, Wayne, for those who aren't familiar with Peaky Blinders?
All right, so it's about a family. It's a gangster kind of movie about early time period. Directly after World War I is kind of where it's settled. It starts in about 1919 in Birmingham, England. And it's about these the family, the Shelbys, that came back from the war. And they're pretty, they have a little gambling ring started up, but they start up as a Shelby family as a group, and you start seeing the one character come through to be more of a leader. But being a gangster movie, you kind of cheer for the bad guy because they're really not good people, but you kind of get into the show and you kind of start wanting to watch them and go, oh, I hope they do this, I hope they get it, but it's bad things they're doing, and you find yourself kind of cheering for them to win. And they got cops and people coming in on them like most gangster movies and how smart they are. But when the main character of Tommy Shelby comes forward and starts becoming the main character and starting to show that he's one of the leaders of the family, that man has no fear in the world. And I guess after coming back from World War I, those guys have already been through hell and back. So, when he gets back, anything he does is nothing equivalent to what he did in the war. And just to see a character that's smart, clever, and someone who takes hold of the moment. The casting is excellent. The storyline is good in the first. each season, as I've got in so far, they were able to take the show and put new points of view in it to get through most seasons. Gives you a different perspective, and then you're watching it again for a different reason. And just how many characters have and how they all intermingle, and it's a really thought-out show. It's really good. Like I said, the first episode was kind of hard because there wasn't a lot of action, and a lot of talking and trying to introduce the characters that I didn't really have the dedication to do, to be honest with you. But after putting in a bit of time and watching it now, big mistake not trying it before, but it's definitely hooked. I still got 2 more seasons to finish, and I'm pretty excited even to see those.
And there are 5 seasons to the series, and there's actually a 6th season to be filmed as soon as COVID allows. So I'm sure you have lots of binge watching left to do yet.
Yeah, it's always good when you find a good one that you want to stick to for a little bit, and this is one you could definitely do. They're hour-long episodes, which are kind of long if you're busy, but definitely worth the time if you're going to sit down and do it and watch it with your significant other. It's definitely not a kid's show, for sure. It's definitely probably not even a young adults or teenage show if you're around the 13, 15 range, but once you're kind of an adult series that if you're interested in kind of gangster movies from the day and how they build up and how they become so powerful, this is definitely one of those shows you'll want to watch.
So, Wayne, we're headed into a long weekend here now, and I know you've brought us reviews on plant-based diets, and you've talked about movie snacks in the past, and I'm just curious if you have any suggestions on foods to eat when you're watching TV or films this weekend.
Oh, the go-to is always popcorn if you're going to put away a night for it, because I always think of popcorn as kind of the occasion where you're putting in an effort to actually watch a movie, but trying to stay a bit on the more healthy front these days. A couple cut-up vegetables, that sort of thing in the evenings. Trying to stay away from chips. Definitely, I've cut out soft drinks in the last probably 6 months. But the Peaky Blinders kind of thing, if you're sitting down and you're making an evening of it, get yourself a nice bottle of wine, sit down with your wife or your significant other, your man, and just sit down and relax and enjoy it.
Well, it sounds like a perfect way to enjoy an evening. Thanks so much, Wayne.
Thank you, and have a good weekend.
You as well. And that is Wayne Walsh, our TV and movie reviewer in Labrador West, and his pick this week is Peaky Blinders. The Curious Lives of Human Cadavers is the topic of the novel Stiff by Mary Roach. And the New York Times bestseller is the topic of Wayne Button's book review this morning. Wayne is our regular book reviewer and joins us from Labrador West. Good morning.
Good morning, Janice. How are you doing today?
I'm pretty good. How are you?
Good. I'm feeling very, very alive this weekend.
Well, this is definitely not a topic for everyone, I would imagine, Wayne. How did you come to read this book, Stiff?
Yeah, well, a lot of times I follow a couple publishers and Goodreads on Twitter, and it's really helpful because they'll put in something, they might say, hey, what's a book everybody's reading this weekend, or what's your favorite book? And it's like 1,000 comments, and of course I scroll down, and I actually came across this book, and a lot of people commented on it. I've always been obviously interested in anatomy, being a chiropractor, and I actually worked on cadavers when I was in chiropractic school. So the fact that someone wrote an entire book on research and the use of cadavers, it super interested me, and I just had to pick it up, and I'm really glad I did, to be honest.
So how does the author Mary Roach approach the topic of human cadavers?
It's great. Like, Mary Roach has, she's an investigative journalist, and she has several books out where she does this. She takes a topic and she just researches it to death. And she does this really well. It's actually fairly comical and interesting. I'm always a fan of nonfiction books that are scientific and interesting, but not boring in the realm of a textbook. So when you're done, you actually learned a lot, but you didn't have to study it. And Mary Roach does that. She takes the topic of cadavers, and each chapter is dedicated to a different topic. So one chapter is dedicated to describing how cadavers are used in research with plastic surgery, the cosmetic industry. You know, she does one where she talks all about how it's used for medical learning, and how, you know, in the early 1800s and 1900s, cadavers were usually picked up by medical students. They were usually past criminals, or they used to actually pay grave robbers to get them for the medical students. And even in Scotland in the early 1900s, some medical students paid their tuition with a body. They would actually bring in a cadaver that they got, God knows how, and they would be, completely released of their expenses for tuition because it was so hard to get bodies for medical students to learn on. She does another, another chapter on how they use the body to investigate decay, and we can find out when someone passed away. Was it 2 days ago? Was it 3 weeks ago? So it's just super interesting. She takes every chapter and dives into a different topic. And it's not really gruesome at all. It's actually really, really interesting. And it puts it in, massive perspective to you how important cadavers are in the world and how much we've learned from them over the last 100 years or so.
I understand as well. She also talks about some of these experiments that have been done throughout history. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I'll keep it PG-13, but she does, there's 2 or 3 experiments in the book that really just completely blew my mind that I do have to mention. So one is in the early 1900s, a lot of scientists became obsessed with, that whole religion science type of interface of, what happens to our body. And a lot of scientists start to study, do we have a soul? And if we do have a soul, how much does it weigh? So one scientist actually had volunteers, people who were pretty much on their deathbed and knew they were going to pass away within a couple of weeks, and put a very high caliber weight machine on the bottom of their hospital beds. And when they would pass, would actually find and see that their weight went down by 3/16 of an ounce or something. And eventually came to the conclusion that the soul weighs 3/16 of an ounce. And then there was a much debate in science. Well, the weight goes down after you pass away because your body releases heat and your body releases gases. So then he went out and did it with some animals to prove that, nope, the animal souls didn't go down, so the humans have a soul and animals don't. So super interesting experiments like that. One particular as well, she goes into an entire topic on the book on the Shroud of Turin, which is basically for people like myself who didn't really know, if you're not overly religious, there's a big belief that the Shroud of Turin is this cloth that the Messiah was wrapped in after he passed away exists. And the church holds on to that and believes that this is it. This is the real Shroud of Turin. And there was tons of studies debating whether or not, with the blood pattern using cadavers, is that really the Shroud of Turin or isn't it? So a lot of scientists would take cadavers and put them in the same position on the cross as the Messiah, and study the blood patterns. And so one person even had volunteers where he would tie them to the actual cross, for a couple hours and see how they breathe and so forth, and if it's possible. So there are so many, I could talk forever about some of the studies, and like I said, I went to chiropractic school. I've never heard of these studies. So it was super interesting how throughout, the last 100 years, how we use cadavers to just interpret and study different things. It's amazing. It's very useful.
I'm pretty sure there's a lot of people who haven't heard about those experiments either, Wayne. And as we mentioned, this book is not going to appeal to everyone. So who do you think would enjoy the novel?
Anybody who is really into science, first year physio, chiropractic, medical students, I always recommend this book. And after I actually released that, I read it. I actually had a lot of chiropractic students I went to school with who told me they've come across it and they read it. Anybody that's open, to the science of cadavers, and I would never use this platform on any way to tell someone what to do, with their body when they pass, whether it's for religious reasons, and a lot of people donate, obviously, their organs, which is great. But one thing that never gets talked about is donating your body to science. And I think this book shows, depending on what your religious beliefs and so forth are with your family, it's something that's not talked about a lot. And it should be something considered. People need to learn that so much is developed and learned. Like, you can save many lives by donating your body to science, because people will use it to study, and it's such an important thing to consider, besides just the religious beliefs and donating organs as well.
So, Wayne, I know you love to pick up a book, read 10 pages a night. What book is it that you're going through right now?
Right now I'm going through two. I'm going through one. Usually I'm really OCD with it. Like, I usually always read a nonfiction and a fiction at the same time. And I'm not allowed to pick up the second book until the first book is halfway through. And the reason why I do that is I'm always finishing a book and I'm always starting a book. I don't know why, but just mentally I feel like that helps me, like I'm achieving more or something. But right now I'm reading two books. I'm reading Breathe, which is a book similar to Stiff, completely devoted to breathing, where it's all about experiments and, meditation and yoga. It's a New York Times bestseller. And I'm also reading one called The Night Circus, which is nonfiction. It's about two magicians, and I'm not too far into it, so I don't know exactly where it's going, but it's about two magicians, and they have this lifelong competition. So, I'm really interested, and I'm probably going to dive into both of them and tackle a lot on this long weekend, I will say.
Well, it sounds like we've got lots to look forward here on Hanging with the Waynes. Thank you so much.
No problem, Janice. You have a great weekend, okay?
You as well, and stay safe.
All right, bye.
And that is our local book reviewer, Wayne Button, giving us the rundown on the book Stiff by Mary Roach. A report by Food Banks Canada shows just how much they've been helping Canadians during the pandemic. According to the report, the charitable organization delivered over 34 million pounds of food to over 4,700 communities, plus millions of dollars in cash. And that has helped ease the burden of many people struggling with food insecurity. For a closer look at the report and the demand on food banks 14 months into the pandemic, we've reached Tanya Little. She is the Chief Development and Partnerships Officer for Food Banks Canada. Good morning.
Good morning, Janice. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us. Tell me more about the report and the demand on food banks these past 14 months.
So we all know that food insecurity has been an issue for probably as long back as we can remember. Unfortunately, with the pandemic, that's created an increased need at food banks. And Food Banks Canada launched a campaign in order to be able to provide support to food banks across the country. So that 34 million pounds of food is just one of the ways we helped, and we ended up raising almost another $100 million in support that we were able to share in communities across the country. Why that's important is that 50% of food banks right across the country have seen extraordinary growth with the numbers of people that are coming through their doors, and that support was needed to help them provide food to their neighbors.
So where in Canada, Tanya, has the demand been the greatest?
The greatest areas that we've seen kind of demand and increase is actually in areas where there's population density. So if you think about kind of medium and large-sized cities, that's where you would see the greatest number. And a lot of that has to do with just the sectors that were impacted. So if you had food services or, the restaurant industry, airline, etc., where there might be lots of people working in where sectors were impacted, that's where you saw issues, as well as those markets are often places where the cost of living is extraordinarily high. So I think just, that kind of shares a lot. And I will say, just depending on where you are in the country, how COVID has impacted your own community looks a little bit different. But we know definitely those medium and large communities were definitely the most impacted.
So how generous have individual Canadians and businesses been during the pandemic?
They have been extraordinarily generous. And I say that in a time when I realize not everybody was in a position to give, but I would say people wanted to be hopeful. They wanted to contribute, and they wanted to know that their neighbors who needed a little bit of extra help could get support. And so we saw extraordinary generosity. Almost $150 million was raised in total during our campaign, and we were able to get that both and share it in food and in money and get that into communities right across the country. We would not have been able to do that without the generosity of Canadians.
Wow, and they certainly have been generous with $150 million raised. That's excellent.
It is. It's extraordinary. And I will say, I think the reason why Canadians rallied and supported this campaign is because they knew we were going to support those 4,700 communities right across the country. And that was our primary objective, was to really alleviate a lot of the stress that local food banks might have to take on. And they have really important work that they need to focus on, which is helping their neighbors and worrying about the food bank operations in their communities.
So what have been some of the biggest challenges operationally during this pandemic for food banks?
There's been a number. I will start by saying the one that probably won't surprise you is that almost 80% of our workforce, so we rely really, really heavily on volunteers. Well, that workforce actually diminished greatly because people really needed to stay at home, or people were of an age group where they were at greater risk. And so volunteers were really our biggest number one challenge organizationally. We also saw really huge disruptions in the supply chain. And what I just mean by that is the normal ways that we would get food. So, grocery store donations, events, community food drives, all of those things got suspended, which meant that food banks had to be really creative about how they acquired food. And I think the third item that I'd highlight is that a lot of food banks operate in really small spaces, and so having to kind of retool how their operations were laid out so that they could keep volunteer staff and clients safe, those are all big challenges to have to be able to juggle as a local organization.
So besides food, Tanya, what else have some food banks been providing during the pandemic?
Obviously, beyond fellowship, which is an important element, human connection is important. One of the things that food banks have really gone out of their way to do is understand needs around PPE. I just know that if, you look at your own budget and say, my goodness, I have so many dollars for different buckets, all of a sudden having to add in the cost of masks, hand sanitizers, and gloves is an extraordinary cost if you're dealing with financial insecurity. And so food banks were able to, through the generosity of a lot of donors, be able to provide that to clients when they were coming to the food bank and alleviate that stress for them at home.
We're 14 months into the pandemic now. Is the demand for food banks easing at all?
Unfortunately not. We have to remember that we're still in the pandemic. We're starting to hopefully look towards the recovery, but that's a long tail out. If I go back to 2008 and really look at what the impact of the 2008 financial crisis was, we saw a 30% increase in the number of clients that came to a food bank for the first time. And unfortunately, those numbers had never come down. So when COVID struck and we started to see increases, I think we have a long tail ahead of us. We have to look and see what the economic impacts are and how long the recovery will take. But I think the important thing for people to know is that food banks will continue to be there for them. We're not the solution to food insecurity, but we certainly are part of the solution in providing that short-term support. And while people need to use the food bank, we'll be there for them, and we'll also to continue to advocate so that people don't have to use food banks long-term.
So if someone is listening and they want to pitch in and contribute to their local food bank, what would you suggest?
Well, I would suggest that they go on to foodbankscanada.ca and they can use the Find a Food Bank feature, and they can find the local food bank in their own community. So in the case of Labrador, that's the Labrador Friendship Centre. But I would say across Newfoundland and Labrador, Community Sharing Association has a number of food banks that they're working with right across the province. And that's a great way to find kind of your own local food bank and give back.
Well, really appreciate your time this morning and for telling us more about this. Hopefully, if there's somebody listening who needs the help, they'll turn to the food bank, and maybe we'll get some more donations for our local ones here in Labrador.
That would be wonderful. Janice, thanks so much for giving us some time to share about the generosity of Canadians.
Thanks, Tanya. Tanya Little is the Chief Development and Partnerships Officer for Food Banks Canada.
For more CBC podcasts, go to cbc.ca/podcasts.